Are landlords more likely to sell their property than an owner occupant? Hmm, that's something we're going to investigate today. Again, is a landlord somebody that owns a rental property? Are they more likely to list their property for sale than an owner occupant, someone who lives in the property and owns it? That's the question that we have today. And if that's something you're curious about, then you're in the right place. Let's talk. Hi, I'm Mike Cerrone with two listings per month, and I'd like to chat with you today about a little research I've been doing into this question of are landlords, or what I call NOO, non-owner occupants, people who own a property but don't live in it, are they more likely to sell their property than an OO or an owner occupant, someone who owns the property and lives in it? It's their primary residence. So that's the question. Who's more likely to sell their property? And therefore, who should you market to if you're trying to get a lot of listings, right? And we're trying to decide if we should pivot or at least add another source of potential listings. So far, we've been working with for sell by owners and expired listings because they're a very hot group, but they're also extremely competitive. So I'm curious if I should add or look at pivoting towards landlords, people who own property but don't live in it, these non-OOs. Okay, so that's the big premise and the big question for today. So I've done a little research on my zip code. I'm in Lakewood, Colorado, and this zip code that we're looking at is in our area, and I'm trying to figure out if it makes sense. And so I've got to compare these landlords to something else. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to compare them to a geographic farm because that's my base of knowledge. That's what I've done a lot of in my career. And so I'm going to look at an entire zip code. And if I were to go out to the OOs, the owner occupants, versus if I were to take that entire zip code and go out to the NOOs or the non-owner occupants, what kind of statistics do I find out? So I've done this research in my MLS. I've also done research into the database, the public records, as well as looking into the postal service and so forth. Okay, so we're going to try to bring this all together. Again, if this is what you want, you're in the right place. Let's keep going because I got a very interesting conclusion here that kind of surprised me. So we'll see what you think. Let's go down the list here. So we've got about 12,500 properties, residential properties. There's, of course, commercial properties too. You got to get those out. So since we're residential agents, residential properties, we got about 12,500 houses, condos, and townhomes in this zip code. All right. So if we're going to look at that, we've got to decide how many of them are owner occupied, how many are non-owner, and the simple math is that the non-owner is about 1,500. It's about 1,512, but let's just say it's 1,500 properties. All right. So what does that mean? That means that our owner occupant is about 11,000. Makes it pretty easy. And we're going to go through and see what this is. Let me give you an example. So if you were going to do every door direct mail, which I think is amazing, I wish it was around when I was a huge farmer years and years ago, and because it's so much cheaper and easier than we used to do bulk mail. It actually was cheaper than bulk mail, and it's easier to get out there. There's less labeling involved and everything else. Pretty cool. If you do every door direct, what happens is the postman just goes around and he puts a piece in every single mailbox on the carrier route, every single box. And so that's why it doesn't have to be addressed with their name. It's very simplistic in that way. It's just every box is going to get this piece from you. And therefore, it's going to be a lower cost, but you have to hit everybody. You can't hit some of them. You have to hit all of them. Now, when they do that, it's going to go into all the boxes of everybody on that route. That includes all the owner occupants, people who live in their own home, but it also includes the tenants inside properties that are owned by someone else. Okay, these investor landlord properties, or what I call NOO, non-owner occupied. So here's the key. When you do the every door direct, it won't go to the owner of the non-owner occupied properties because they live somewhere else. Okay. Maybe they live in the neighborhood. Okay. That's possible. But more than likely, they live somewhere else, another city, another state, or just some other zip code. They just live somewhere else. And that's the assumption you've got to make. So when you go to the every door direct, it covers everything. It's cheap, but it's only going out to the owner occupants. Okay. And in that situation, it's going to be about 20 cents a piece. We've got 12,500. So it's about $2,500 per mailing. Okay. $2,500 per mailing. So keep that number in the back of your head. I'm going to step back from it and give you some more stats that'll be very helpful. I've got some pretty simplistic numbers to work with, which is cool. In the zip code, there are about 500 cells per year. In fact, I just looked it up. It was 519 in the past 12 months. So right around 500, right? So nice, simple math. And it just happens to break out that 300 of them, in this case, 303, when I did the count, were owner occupant cells. And just around 200 were non-owner. In fact, it was 216 non-owner. But to keep it simple in our head, about 300 were owner occupant and 200 were non-owner occupant. All right. So right off the bat, it's kind of interesting, right? We got 10,500 units are generating 300 cells. And then we got 1,500 units that are generating over 200 cells. Right off the bat, this is very interesting and intriguing. We got to look deeper into it because there's a lot of turnover happening in those owner occupants versus the, non-owner occupants versus the owner occupants. In fact, let's go a little deeper into that. So if we keep running those numbers, that basically shows, I've got the number, it's just under 3%. It's 2.75% of the owner occupants are turning every year. Okay, about 1 in 30 something. So 1 in 36, by the way, 1 in 36 of these homes are selling each year currently. That's the rate. Now, the non-owner occupants, that's kind of interesting, very interesting, actually. They're at 14.1% turn. Wow, 14 versus less than 3. A little over 14 are less than 3. That's incredible differential, right? And in fact, for the non-owner occupied, it's about 1 in 7 of their properties are selling every year. Wow. Oh my gosh. This is a massive opportunity right here. I mean, if you do the math, just do it in your head. 36 versus 7, that's a 5 factor. So basically, it's 5 times more likely to get a sell from a landlord than to get a sell from an owner occupant. 5 times. 5 times more likely to get a sell from a non-owner occupant than an owner occupant. I knew it might be a little better. I didn't realize it was going to be that much better. So because of that, I'm really thinking about shifting. So let me give you an example on the cost. I told you earlier that to go every door direct to get out to the owner occupants. And by the way, you could mail them directly, but it'd be even more. The every door direct will cover them the cheapest. That's about $2,500 in the zip code per mailing to get out to these 12,500 properties. And 11,000 of them are owner occupieds. Now, if we go out to the non-owner occupied, the 1,500 people, 1,512, I think it was. If we go out to them, then we've got to go first class mail because they're all scattered all over the place. They're all over the city, they're all over the state, they're all over the country, they're all over the place. So we got to go first class mail. And that's going to be 51 cents. Okay, so let's just imagine it's half a dollar, right? So you got to get out to all these people. So it's going to be a higher cost per mailing, but there's so much fewer of them. The question is, well, what's the total mailing cost? And by the way, I'm doing all these analysis just on the mailing cost, not on the printing cost, because the printing cost becomes negligible at these large numbers. It's pretty small. There is a cost, but it's just telling you it's negligible. The big cost is the mailing cost, the cost to deliver. So let's go back into that. So the NOOs, I ran the numbers there, the 51 cents. Let me give you some more information. Before I give you that number, you got to know something else. The 1512, it's not all of those. You don't have to mail out 1,512 separate pieces, because with non-owner occupieds, some of these investors own multiple units. The same person owns two or three or four or five properties. So Sally Jones, she doesn't just own one rental, she owns three. So if you're going to do a mailing, you only have to send her one piece, and that's going to get in front of someone who owns three properties, right? So I went ahead and did that research, and let me give you some of that data. It was kind of interesting. Again, if you like numbers, this is pretty cool. So 1512 total rentals, houses, condos, and townhomes. There were 286 that were duplicate mailings. In other words, they owned multiple properties. That's about 19%, almost 20%, almost 1 in 5. And so we reduced that out. We'd only actually have to mail to 1,226 distinctive mailing addresses. So from 1,500 down to 1,200, basically, okay? I mean, we're knocking out 300 mailings that we wouldn't have to do. That's pretty cool, right? But if you do the actual hardcore math, and then we take the 51 cents times this 1226, the total cost for the mail out or the postage is $625 per mailing. $625 per mailing versus $2,500 to go out to all the OOs. So the OOs, owner occupants, it's going to cost $2,500 in postage. Whereas with the non-owner occupieds, it's only going to cost $625. So that's like a factor of 4 in the cost, a factor of 4. So it's going to cost you 4 times more to go out the OOs, and your odds of finding someone is 5 times less with the OOs. So the NOOs are just looking better and better all the time. Now, it's a different approach because we're talking about investors, and they have different needs than an owner occupant. They're more business oriented. They're more focused on the numbers. They're more analytical. They've got different problems than an OO, right? An owner occupant's biggest problem is, where am I going to move to, right? I don't want to be homeless. Whereas a landlord's biggest problem is, I got a tenant who's not paying, or I want to make sure I get a good tenant in there, or I fixed up the property and they've damaged the property. You know, they've got different issues. And then on the investment side, they've got to decide, do I want to take this cash and pay some tax on it, or do I want a 1031 exchange and get it over to another property? You know, so they've got some other issues. They've got different sets of things that they're looking at. So if you're going to market to the NOOs versus the OOs, you got to be aware of that. You want to be talking their language and what they're concerned about, right? And then we'll talk more about that later if we pursue this. My first question was, hey, should you pursue landlords versus owner occupants? And based on this initial analysis, I think the answer is yeah. It has a ton of potential. So I'm going to look into this a little more. Already start designing some marketing around it, and I'll try to keep you updated on what happens. But I think this is a huge opportunity to go out to the NOs, non-owner occupants, these landlords. Have you ever done that? Do you pursue landlords or investor properties? If so, tell me down in the comments. What's been your experience? How's it been working out? And if you like this kind of material, go ahead and give us a thumbs up if you think we should do more of this and talk more about these landlords and these NOO type properties. And again, if you have any questions about anything we went through, because I know I kind of threw a lot out there, go ahead and put them down in the comments and let me know what you're thinking. All right, I hope this has been helpful. Take care. Bye now.